Good morning and welcome, everyone.
Good morning.
It's so good to be together this morning. I'm Reverend William Levwood, affectionately known as Rev Lev. My pronouns are he and him. I'm the minister here at Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I invite you to take a deep breath as we center ourselves for worship together. We open and welcome to the ancestral people of this land, acknowledging that our church, like all of Burke, rests on the unceded territory of the Manahoac tribe of the Great Sioux Nation. We seek healing and the realization of justice with the people of this land who live on and their descendants, the present-day members of the Monacan Indian Nation, the Patawomic Indian Tribe of Virginia, and the Piscataway Indian Nation. We honor the ancestors as we move toward healing so that all together may one day know full justice.
Welcome to Accotink Unitarian Universalist Church. I'm Sheila Doles, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm so happy to be your worship associate today. I hope you've got a name tag or put your name on your Zoom name tag, and if you need help with that, let us know in the chat. If you aren't new to Accotink, look around. Do you see people you haven't met or spoken to in a while? These people like you and want to meet you. Help us live up to our mission to be a welcoming and inclusive spiritual home for all by reaching out and making a connection. By visiting this congregation, newcomers are in transition, and people in transitions are more open to new friendships. That means your new best friend might be here this morning, and this is your chance to get to them before someone else does. Whether you're a longtime member or a newcomer or something in between, we encourage you to stay for our social hour online and in person immediately after this service. We're so delighted that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
If you'll please rise for our chalice lighting words. These are words from our proposed new UU values. Let's say them together. Love is the center of Unitarian Universalism. Love is the practice of our living tradition. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant to help everyone flourish with dignity, honor the web of life, be beloved community, cultivate generosity, celebrate diversity, and transform the world with love. So October is our Soul Matters theme is heritage as part of exploring our new Article 2, our proposed Article 2 this year. Studying that, which will be voted on at General Assembly as to whether we take that new Article 2 as our new Article 2 for our future going forward. Last week, we took the opportunity of exploring heritage to look at the foundations of our Unitarian Universalist heritage. And I lifted up two primary foundations, the use of multiple sources. I was thinking about this after the service, how deeply theological that choice is, rooted in the idea that no one person or group of people has a monopoly on truth, that all truth is partial. And secondly, our UU call to transform the world, which is rooted in the theological conviction that people have the potential to be good, and that potential is dependent on their environment, on an interdependent web that is diverse and changing, and that we are co-creating with each other. Today, we'll expand that exploration to look at how to heal our ancestral heritage. So that back and forth that's been going on even before we arrived, and that continues in our lives. So we're going to look at how to heal our ancestral heritage, both familial and societal. And then next Sunday, we'll celebrate our annual blessing of the animals. I invite you to send photos of your pets. We'll send out an announcement this afternoon about this. Send photos of your pets, both deceased and living, to our Director of Spiritual Development so that we can include those in our service next week. You can also send photos of wild animals. That service will explore our evolutionary heritage and how it continues to inform and live in our bodies and in our interactions with the natural world and with each other. And then the fourth Sunday of the month, the following Sunday after that, we're going to honor the founding of this congregation and celebrate how it has been a community of care for so many who have found it over the years.
Good morning. Good morning. How many of you have struggled when creating something new in your life, only to find you had to let that go and start all over again? It's painful, right? Especially when we've invested a lot of our time, energy, emotions, and sometimes money. I can think of many areas in my own life where the pain of loss in all of these areas has affected me. We ask ourselves questions such as, what do we do with the pieces that are left? How do we heal from the aftermath? For our Time for All Ages, I wanted to share a book about healing and making something new out of the broken pieces in our lives. The book, entitled Many Shapes of Clay, A Story of Healing, has such a powerful message of the stages of healing and trying again, from creativity to loss to healing, and then on to more creativity. As we read together, think of the many areas of life this story can apply to and the beautiful message that the author communicates through the illustrations, parallels, and words. Many Shapes of Clay, written and illustrated by Kanisha Sneed. This is Isha. You say it like Isha, and this is her cat who loves to take long naps. This is Isha's mama. She works in a small studio inside the basement of their apartment where she makes shapes from clay. Small shapes, tall shapes, even bumpy, colorful shapes. Isha asks her mama why she doesn't play with the shapes. Why do you leave them on the shelves? It takes so much time and patience to make each shape, her mama explains. They are too fragile to play with. Mama slices off a chunk of clay like butter, then rolls it into a ball like dough and hands it to Isha. Isha stretches and smooths and rolls the clay in her hands. She doesn't know what she'll make today. Maybe I'll make a two-headed lizard with polka dots, she thinks to herself. One shape in particular makes Isha very happy. It reminds her of the day last summer when she and Papa picked a handful of lemons. She paints her shape the same bright yellow. All this hard work deserves a pause, Mama says. How about some fresh air? Sweat drips down from the top of her head to the tip of her chin. Mama misses Papa too. Outside, a summer breeze rustles through the neighborhood trees while the sun slowly sinks behind the buildings. Isha sits on the stoop and plays with her yellow shape. The whole neighborhood seems to be taking a pause, except for Miss Harrington from the flower market. She rides past with a backpack full of lavender. She waves at Isha as a sprig of lavender falls out of her backpack and floats down the sidewalk. Isha wonders if Miss Harrington will notice the missing sprig when she gets home. And if she does, will she feel sad about it? As Isha sits on the stoop, she imagines so many things she could do with her shape. Maybe we'll go to the beach someday, Isha says to herself. The sound of the ocean hugging the shore as water cooled her toes would feel so good. The rumble of a skateboard interrupts Isha's daydream. She looks down at her shape. It's less yellow now, like the color of a lemon that's lost its taste and not as soft. But that's okay, because now it makes music when Isha taps it with her fingers. Tap, tap, tap. Isha taps her clay. Tap, tap, crack. Isha's shape has broken into many shapes on the ground. Each piece reflects the sadness she feels. Isha tries to think of ways to put the pieces back together. Tape wouldn't last very long, and glue always sticks to the wrong things. What Isha feels is hard to describe, like something that is too heavy to lift, like something that might last forever. The sunlight is fading and the breeze has stopped blowing through the trees. Isha's eyes fill with tears as she looks down at all the broken pieces. What happened? Asks Mama as she scoops Isha up onto her lap. I gave my shape so much time and patience, but now it's in pieces, Isha says. It's okay to feel sad about those broken pieces, Mama says. There are times, many times, when we lose the things we love. Mama somehow knows what Isha is feeling. I never knew she could feel the same feelings, Isha thinks, and hugs her Mama close. Together, they pick up the broken pieces and walk past the shapes on Mama's shelves, stepping over the last step where the cat purrs sound asleep. You can't always fix what's broken, but you can always try, Mama says, as she pulls out a small box from under her bed. Inside are spindles of twine in different sizes, colors, and textures. Slowly, with patience and care, Mama and Isha connect all the broken pieces together by looping twine around each one, until there is only one piece left. Maybe I can make it into something new tomorrow, Isha thinks out loud. What a wonderful idea, Mama says, gazing at Isha with a warm smile. Now let's wash up and see what we can come up with for dinner. Thank you.
Walking with My Delaware Grandfather by Denise Lowe. Walking home, I feel a presence following and realize he's always there. That native man with coal-black hair who is my grandfather. In my first memories, he is present, mostly wordless, resident in the house where I was born. My mother shows him the cleft in my chin, identical to his. I am swaddled and blinking in the kitchen light. So we are introduced. We never part. Sometimes I forget he lodges in my house still, the bone house where my heart beats. I carry his mother's framework, a sturdy structure. I learn his birthright. I hear his mother's teaching through what my mother said of her. She kept a pot of stew on the stove all day for anyone to eat. She never went to church, but said, you could be a good person anyway. She fed hobos during the 30s, her back porch a regular stopover. Every person has rights, no matter what color. Be respectful. This son of hers, my grandfather, still walks the streets with me. Some twist of blood and heat still spark across the time bridge. Here, listen. Air draws through these lungs made from his. His blood still pulses through this hand.
As we hear in this poem from Denise Lowe, our heritage is with us in the present. Her grandfather's spirit walking with her, her grandfather's spirit pulsing within her, breathing with her as she takes air into her lungs, present in the cleft of her chin, present too in the bone house that holds her heart. And not only her grandfather, but his mother is present in her life through the stories told by the poet's mother. How her grandfather's mother kept a pot of stew on the stove all day for anyone to eat, even bringing food out onto the porch to feed the homeless during the Great Depression. This heritage of respect for the dignity of every person has been passed down to the poet and lives now in her heart, in her hands. Whoever we are, like the poet, our heritage lives in our bodies, forms us, our heart, our hands, our ways of being. And this heritage can be a source of blessing, can be a healing heritage. But our heritage can also bring wounding, can be a heritage in need of healing. Often our heritage is both of these, blessing and wounding all at once. And I believe this is true whether we're speaking of our family heritage, our cultural heritage, or our national heritage. No matter who we are, each of these heritages brings both blessing and trauma, calls forth both healing and the need for healing. The stories that live in our bodies become us. So healing our heritage means mining these stories. It helps when we've been told the stories, like the poet was told the stories of her great-grandmother, when we're given the context for what we know is true in our bodies. This is why the assault on teaching the full truth about American history is so dangerous. It's just one example. If you're white in America, you have benefited from numerous programs to bring economic benefit to you through your descendants, from land, through your ancestors, from land given to settlers as European Americans moved west, to New Deal programs during the Depression that were not available to Americans of color, to the GI Bill and housing loans after World War II, also largely not available to Americans of color. Without knowing these stories, no true understanding of our American heritage or how to heal America of its caste system of inequality can be found. We need to know how much affirmative action has been given to white Americans. Without that history, false narratives of self-made men fuel a mythology that continues to privilege the wealthy, deepening the divide between rich and poor, a divide that has grown astronomically over the past 50 years. This is just one example of how it helps to know our heritage, to know the stories and the context of that heritage if we're going to heal. But that heritage, as I said earlier, lives in our bodies. It forms our psyches, including our deepest held beliefs about ourselves and our place in the world. And because our heritage lives in the body, even if you don't know much about your heritage, your family heritage, your cultural heritage, you can still heal that heritage. Rabbi Tirza Firestone has written in her book, Wounds into Wisdom, Healing Intergenerational Trauma, that healing from trauma has two key elements: finding a safe witness and the ripeness of time. Let's look at that latter example first. It needs to be acknowledged that at certain points in our lives, especially immediately after a traumatic event, the traumatic wound needs a protective layer for that first part of healing. And in the case of ancestral trauma within our familial or cultural heritage, it's often also true that only once we've found a certain amount of stability that we're able to do the deeper work of healing our heritage. We need to wait for the time to be ripe. And once the time is ripe, and not before, then it's time to share our story, and for that story to be held and heard by another. As Rabbi Firestone writes, with a compassionate listener, we enter a circle of safety where we can slowly begin to trust again. Within this relationship, where we are truly seen and heard, we may begin to find meaning in our experience, and our humanity can begin to be restored after it has been stolen from us. Rabbi Firestone also shares how religious traditions and spiritual community can be a crucial container for this healing. She shares the ways that Jewish tradition, with its many communal rituals for moving through grief and trauma, can support this healing process. And many years ago, after a traumatic tragedy in my own family, I experienced this firsthand. I mean that quite literally. I experienced much needed support from the Jewish tradition after that tragedy, as a member of a Jewish renewal congregation led by Rabbi Tirza Firestone, Reb Tirza, as she is affectionately known. I want to say that even with that support, the healing took many years. I remember distinctly how halfway through seminary, a professor of mine described me as an almost entirely different person. You see, it had taken 5 years for me to work through the most challenging part of that healing process, a process that included steeping myself in both traditional Jewish rituals and rituals inspired by Judaism, but tailor-made for my particular suffering. So after 5 years, I was finally able to emerge from what felt like a thick, heavy cloud of darkness. And once I had moved through the process of healing, or at least that first stage of it, the difference was palpable, both within my own body and to those around me. Reb Tirza writes about the importance of doing this healing work because when we do not engage in this process of healing, she writes, like stowaways who hide beneath the decks of our ship, painful memories go below the radar of our conscious minds, yet whisper their secrets, drag and drain, compel and command us. She continues, writing that Jews and all peoples who have suffered the traumatic effects of degradation and displacement, racial oppression and violent persecution simply for being themselves must wrestle with their legacies. And I would contend that we all have traumas in our legacies. Reb Tirza outlines a series of steps in this healing process that I'm going to share with you. The first step being to face the pain. She writes that turning to face our losses takes courage and fortitude. That it may be our greatest act of will to simply face our pain, to go against all the voices that would have us just keep going. Tending to trauma, she continues, takes immense patience and inward focus, and enough self-love to allow ourselves time and attention. She emphasizes how difficult this can be in a culture that often tries to rush or even bypass this healing process, urging us to just get on with life. But if we buckle to that pressure, the pain exerts its powerful and invisible pressure in our lives, pushes us, directs our actions without our even knowing. This is why Reb Tirza urges us to face our pain as the first step, and then to learn to harness the power of that pain. Now, there are many ways to harness the power of pain. These ways can include therapy, exercise, creative expression, meditation, study, activism. The ability, Rabbi Firestone writes, to befriend rather than suppress the energies released by our pain is a critical step in our healing journey. Rick Foster and Greg Hicks, authors of the book How We Choose to Be Happy, call this harnessing of the power of pain recasting. Just as metals can be melted and then reshaped, psychological recasting involves putting our pain into a psychological furnace and melting that pain down. Then, like a melted metal, our pain can be recast into a different shape. It's still the same material, the same raw material, but it can be reshaped. They write that by allowing ourselves to feel our negative emotions, we're able to forge a richer, deeper meaning from the trauma. The next step, Reb Tirza tells us, in healing our heritage is finding new community. She quotes trauma psychologist Peter Levine, who says, "Trauma is about broken connections with the body, self, family, friends, community, nature, and spirit. And healing trauma is about restoring connections." Reb Tirza shares about a woman, Lena, who lost her cousin in a tragic car accident when Lena was still a child. Years later, realizing that this event had arrested her development, Lena explored this latent trauma in therapy. Now, while she was able to make some progress in therapy, the real breakthrough in her healing came when Lena joined a local women's art collective. It was in that community, as the artists shared how their inner journeys were expressed through art, that Lena found the emotionally safe and responsive community she needed for her healing. We too need community to support us through our journey of healing. Now, when I chose to use Reb Tirza's book on healing intergenerational trauma as the basis for this sermon, I of course had no idea war would yet again break out between Israel and Palestine. As a rabbi writing about intergenerational trauma, Reb Tirza does address the cycle of trauma that contributes to this ongoing violence between these two traumatized peoples. And writing about this, Rabbi Firestone emphasizes something we might not otherwise think to emphasize: the risk that trauma can encourage us to dehumanize the person, people, or nation that contributed to that traumatic pain. She cautions us that when we allow this to happen, we can take on the role of victim and channel our pain into rage, even into a desire for vengeance, even into a hate that can eat away at our own hearts. Through the struggle, we can find our way to healing, a healing that can enable us to transform our pain in that furnace of our heart. Whether it's personal pain or pain from our familial, cultural, or national heritage, we can find a way to healing that enables us to transform our pain into loving action. This loving action can take many forms. It might be a transformation in how we parent our own children, or a change in our career to something that helps us better transform the world with love. Or this loving action might be through engaging in social justice advocacy, or it might be a form of volunteering, like volunteering with Just Neighbors, or choosing to serve on a committee here at Accotink, or mentoring a student at an elementary school. The loving action that comes from doing the hard work of healing our heritage can take many forms, but engaging in this loving action is a crucial part of our healing. Reb Tirza writes that for every person I interviewed, finding purpose and taking action after tragedy was central to their recovery. But she goes on to emphasize that for each person, tending the inner self was the foundation to these outward actions. For almost every person I studied, she writes, going through some form of a dark night of the soul preceded finding meaningful work in the world. Facing what happened, deeply mourning losses, and following the circuitous river of emotions came first. This very personal work, she emphasizes, cannot be bypassed or rushed. It is a necessary prelude to outward action. Without it, we will be hard-pressed to summon the energy to move forward into the world. So our heritage, whether familial, cultural, or national, is a complex melange of gifts and curses. We all have our own pumpkin spice mixture of curses and blessings. We are called to carry forth the blessings, and we are called to heal the wounds of our heritage, to transform the trauma into hard-won wisdom and into loving action. To do this, we must face our pain. We must harness the energy of this pain to empower us to be vessels of love, justice, and healing in our own lives and in the lives of our family, culture, nation, and world. We do this work of healing heritage in our hearts. This healing is the work of inner transformation. We also do this work of healing heritage in community. This healing work cannot be done in isolation alone. Tending to our hearts and nurturing communal connection as we heal our heritage has the power to transform our trauma into love, our wounds into wisdom. May we commit to this healing journey for ourselves, for our families, for our culture, our nation, and our world. May it be so, and may we be among those who make it so. Amen, 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 and blessed be.
Please rise now in body or in spirit and join in our closing words. You may join hands or just extend your hands, whatever you're comfortable with. This church is dedicated to the proposition that behind all our differences and beneath all our diversity, there is a unity that makes us one and binds us forever together in spite of time, death, and the space between the stars. We pause now in silent witness. to that unity.